Welcome to the O'Connor Elder Law channel. I'm your host, Melissa O'Connor. I'm a Florida-based elder law attorney who does estate planning, focusing on long-term care needs, commonly referred to as Medicaid planning, and I do probate, and I do it well. Today I wanted to talk to you about some of the recent legislation that was passed in the CARE Act in response to the COVID-19 crisis that is impacting our country as well as the world. So we've all been following the laws as it impacts employers and individuals and all of that. There's been so much talk on the media about what is in this CARE Act, what's not in the CARE Act. And I just wanted to take an opportunity, now that it has been signed into law, to discuss how the CARE Act impacts your IRA, and specifically how it impacts your RMD, the required minimum distribution. So many of my clients are of the age where they are required at this point to take an RMD from their IRA, meaning they must start to take disbursements from their IRA, which is a type of investment account that has tax advantages. So since this was been non-tax money, the IRS says at a certain point you're going to have to pay taxes on this money, and we're going to require that you take a minimum distribution so that way we can start to collect some tax money from this investment. And so those who do not need access to this money generally do not like taking the distribution, and they would rather allow the money to sit there and accrue and grow and be there as a legacy for the next generation. And with the CARE Act, in response to the COVID-19 crisis, what the government said was that for the year 2020, you do not have to take an RMD. So those of you who are of the age that would otherwise be required to take an RMD, in response to the COVID-19 crisis, the CARE Act provides that you do not need to take an RMD at this time. So you might be wondering, should I take my RMD or should I not take the RMD? Is this a good thing? Is this not a good thing? What does this mean for me? So I wanted to be able to talk about it and specifically address some of those types of inquiries. And those of you who don't need to have this money, don't need to tap into this money at this time, it would be a good thing for you to not take your RMD at this time for two reasons. And one of the reasons is because how your RMD is calculated. Your required minimum distribution is calculated based on what the value of your IRA was at December 31st the year before. So December 31st, 2019, our market was in a much better position than it is presently, right? We've all taken a hit. We know this, as anybody who has any sort of monies in the market is aware. So your RMD, if you were to take it, is going to be calculated based on what the value was at December 31st, 2019, which is not its present value. And you would also be charged taxes based on that value as of December 31st, 2019, which again is not the present value of your IRA. So there are advantages to not take the RMD if you don't need to, if you don't need access to this money at this time. If you have other sources of income and ability to avoid tapping in, you might want to avoid tapping in for 2020 because the way that the required minimum distribution is calculated and the tax impacts that you would be paying. Nobody likes to pay taxes unnecessarily if they don't have to. And if you're able to avoid having to take a distribution and pay taxes on this income, as income, it's particularly when it's going to be calculated at a value that no longer exists due to market conditions, you would benefit from not taking a required minimum distribution. So then there's another element of this. I do Medicaid planning, and many of my clients take RMDs because it's required based on their age, and also because to qualify for Medicaid, one of the things that we do is we look at your assets and your income. And if your IRA is in a payout status, and to be in a payout status, you need to be taking the required minimum distributions. And if your IRA is in a payout status, it's not considered an asset for Medicaid purposes. Instead, it's considered an income stream. And generally speaking, we handle that through a qualified income trust, or it's also known as a Miller trust. So those people who are Medicaid recipients or are going to be applying for Medicaid this year will need to still take an RMD for 2020 if they would like their IRA to be treated in a payout status for purposes of Florida's Medicaid. So with that, those folks that need their IRA to be considered in payout status, the CARE Act does not provide any sort of relief for them. It does not say, oh, that if you're of age and of the age that's required to have a minimum distribution, but you elect not to take it because of the CARE Act, you could still be in payout status. There's nothing like that. You're either in payout status and take an RMD, or you're not. And so those people who are Medicaid recipients and need their IRA to be in a payout status, they need to continue to take their RMD. Even if their financial advisor would say, hey, there's this CARE Act, it's really wonderful, don't take it this year because of tax implications, yada, yada, yada. You need to be able to understand why you need an RMD, and it might not be because you actually need the cash on hand, because it really just flows through your quit, and you could say, hey, no, I don't need this cash on hand because it just goes through my qualified income trust. You do need to take that RMD because you need your IRA to be considered an income stream for purposes of calculating your qualifications for Medicaid instead of as an asset. So I hope that this has provided some sort of clarity to you whether or not you should take your required minimum distribution for your IRA, if you could benefit from this CARE Act legislation, or if it's not something that that you necessarily benefit from, and you want to be clear so that way you don't make any sort of changes that would negatively impact your ability to continue to qualify for Medicaid for your long-term care needs, which might be much more valuable than saving a few bucks in taxes and avoiding taking an RMD, because those of you who do need long-term care through Medicaid, it's much more valuable to have your long-term care benefits than it is to avoid some taxes. If you wanted to talk more about this topic or any other sorts of topics that you hear me speak on, feel free to sign up for a free appointment to talk with me at eldermeeting.com. I'm happy to set a time where we can chat about any Florida elder law issue that may be of concern to you or your loved one. Again, eldermeeting.com. I ask that you like and share with others if this content has been helpful. Thank you for joining me.